name is Finn,
Hello, I'm Warren.
and today we are talking about
Space exploration and commercial space.
well, thanks for coming all the way from Texas
Thank you
to
for
be here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
Welcome. How's your summer going?
appreciate it. It's been really nice. I was in Houston this last fall. Then I was in LA for the spring. Now I'm back here in the Ham for a little bit of summer, having a little bit of time off, which has been really nice, honestly. And then I go back to finish up my senior year, Rice University, this coming fall. Honestly, one more year, then I enter the workforce. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I've got one more quarter, and then I'm in that boat, which is
go.
crazy.
Mhm.
But as with several people on this show already, we know each other from high school
That's true.
and middle school.
Yeah.
Actually.
We've been through the whole Bellingham school system. Yep.
Yeah. I'm a year ahead of you. So I graduated in 2020, and you graduated in 2021.
hmm
But I feel like I became friends with you probably around 2019
Yeah.
or so ish. I mean, we knew each other before then, but
hmm
it's been a good time with like kind of our
Oh
friend
God,
group.
yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I feel like through early high school when we first started like interacting a lot more, like to mid and late high school, that was a really fun group. And honestly, I mean, going through COVID was tough, but y'all were a huge help through that whole thing, definitely.
Yeah, and then that first summer after
Oh yeah.
the summer 2021 where we were all
Built the garage. Yeah.
we were all vaccinated and able to go out and do fun things again after a year of being inside.
God, that was
Which is
nice.
pretty
Yeah.
great. But yeah, so you went on to go to Rice.
Mhm.
And what are you up to at Rice? What are you studying?
Well, I'm studying mechanical engineering. I've been taking some econ classes as well, but I don't think I'll pursue the major in that. Within mechanical engineering, I have a thermal fluid specialization, so it's kind of more on like aerospace tracked. Rice doesn't have an aerospace engineering degree, but at the undergraduate level, honestly, the degrees are very similar.
Yeah.
What really differentiates them is a few upper level classes, which I have access to most of them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So you what the degree you're pursuing and the classes you're taking are still applicable to aerospace.
Oh, very much so.
stuff.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the aerospace industry itself is comprised mainly of mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, software engineers. Aerospace in general, the traditional aerospace engineering is done by a very small section of the actual workforce. And when I talk about the traditional aerospace engineering, people often think of like, fluid simulation, compressible flow, stuff like, how does an aircraft generate lift or anything like that. But there's so many different facets that go into aircraft design, or also in my case, for launch vehicle, on-orbit vehicles, satellite design, whole swath of engineering disciplines that all combine. Very interdisciplinary field, which has been very fun.
And so you said you were in LA.
Yeah.
What have you been up to? What were you up to in LA?
So I was fortunate enough to be able to work and game the credit system a bit at Rice to be able to take a semester off. And I ended up taking a job at SpaceX down in LA at the Hawthorne headquarters. Now headquarters being moved to Texas. That's another thing. But I was working there. I worked there for just about 5 months, so a long internship. They allowed me to extend, which was nice.
Wow.
I was on the Dragon ETCS team. So it's the environmental control and life support system team. So we work on keeping the astronauts alive, bringing them to the ISS, and developing future projects for space exploration.
Yeah, and so the Dragon is a capsule.
Yes.
That sits on top of a rocket and sends people up to the International Space Station.
The Dragon is currently the primary contract for delivering of cargo and astronauts to the ISS. We take commercial crews as well as federal crews up there, and the Dragon is also capable of its own private missions, like coming up here in supposedly at the end of this month, but there could be delays. There is a Polaris Dawn mission, which is a privately funded first ever commercial spacewalk mission. They'll be utilizing the Dragon capsule. And that was what I would say the bulk of my work was this spring, is developing that mission.
That's pretty cool. We'll get to more space stuff in a minute.
Oh yeah.
But because I know you had to remind yourself, what did you have for breakfast
Okay.
this morning?
for breakfast, so I was in Seattle this morning. I was visiting from some friends from school down there who just started work, just moved in their apartment. And on the way back up, we stopped in Marysville at Ron's 24-hour diner. I got the 3-meat special. Very good. All 3 meats were quite delectable.
Sausage, ham, bacon?
Sausage, ham, bacon. Yes, correct. Yep. There we go. All 3 meats. Whole food pyramid of meats.
Right.
It was amazing. Just classic diner breakfast, I guess. Yeah. Good old American diner food. Honestly, really good.
I just ate right before this.
That's true.
I only ate like half of my breakfast. I'll eat the other half once we wrap. But I have been kind of an addict for the bagelry in downtown Bellingham, and I have, I think 3 or 4 times in the last week, have gotten their bagel with lox spread.
It's so good. Oh
and
my!
It's so good. I'm gonna chill for a minute here.
Yeah.
It's really good, and it's like $5, which is at least for. It's not a bad price, I don't think.
Honestly, growing up here, the bagelry's always been like a pillar. I love that place. There's selections like crazy. I mean, basically bagelry ad coming here. Like we're blur it out if you need to. But damn, like all their spreads, all the custom sandwiches they have, even their cafe is actually really good too.
Yeah,
definitely one of the best Bellingham institutions.
We're pro bagelry.
We're pro bagelry.
We're pro bagelry. Which is a lot of Bellingham institutions have fallen.
True.
Rocket Donuts.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
No more.
2 Rocket Donuts locations gone.
Yeah. Reduced to atoms.
The meteoric rise and fall from grace. The Rocket Donuts story. It's tragic.
Yeah.
And God, yeah, the actual fall to ashes of some buildings. Downtown Bellingham started with the Holes Feed and Seed and the record store on the corner there. That was a few years back.
That was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Still.
And then obviously the tragic loss of the corner of the street coffee shop was previously Tony's Coffee, and I feel so bad that I'm forgetting what its name was.
It will always be Tony's to me, honestly.
Sure. Well, it's formerly known as Tony's. I think the Old Independent.
Old Independent
was what it was called when it was reestablished. But the building had been there for I believe over 100 years, and it tragically burned down, and along with the death of the owner who was inside back in December. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
It was a real loss. It was my favorite coffee shop. I think we were just talking about it the other day.
Yeah.
About how much we missed that place.
Oh, definitely. I remember I was there when the fire happened. I was there with Wilson, friend. We were walking around. We honestly just watched it. That was stunning to see. It was a sad moment. We felt like we were witnessing, I don't know, special part in Bellingham's history. A morbid one, but
yeah.
That same winter, the State Street Bar caught fire.
Yes. So I never went there, and I'm sure it will be rebuilt. But the State Street Bar,
a classic Bellingham dive,
a week or 2 weeks later, burned out. And luckily, no one was hurt.
Yeah,
in
thankfully
that situation. I don't think anyone was there, but yeah, it was really.
That place had character. I remember all the chairs were office chairs, like the swivel ones. Oh my God, just the popcorn machine was going 24/7. That thing had so much business. Honestly, fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
We'll lead in to outer space with your shirt.
Oh yeah.
Which says, what does it say?
It says, NASA fired me for taking the rover off sick jumps. I love the shirt. I got it when I was in LA. I went to basically a weekend market, and there was this guy that had a bunch of his own clothing that he screen printed, ran a little screen printing business. And I especially loved this one because it was topical to work. I got this and another one with a goose on it. It says, "Keep it loosey-goosey, baby." 2 very good purchases. Recommend checking it out. I forget what the dude's name is, so I guess I can't really endorse it. But that was fun. And so I do not actually work for NASA, which is why I bought the shirt as well. But I technically work for NASA because pretty much all the work I do is started because of what NASA did. Roughly in the late 90s, starting their commercial space grant program.
Right. So you're contracted.
Contracted. I'm a contractor. We're all kind of contractors, but now at this point, at least where I've worked at SpaceX in the past, has kind of hit this critical mass where, and a lot of the industry has, that you're moving away from government contracts to the point where you can have an actual self-sustaining entity as a corporate body. You see that with SpaceX in Starlink, Falcon 9 launches, generating a lot of profit that way. Now, make no mistake, companies like that still entirely revolve around government funding, government contracts, because that's what built the industry. But we're kind of at an interesting point right now where there's this transition between all of old space and some of new space being completely reliant on government institutions, primarily NASA and DoD contracts, to the point where there is now enough of a market where companies startups can begin without all this huge government funding and actually have a market to dive into that is entirely commercial space. So commercial space is, it's what I'm working in, it's what I'm interested in going into in my future. And it's something that I'm still kind of just at the beginning of exploring.
So it's really becoming its own thing, its own
very much
own entity.
And this has always been the plan from NASA. Honestly, NASA masterminded this whole thing back in the late 90s because they were at a position where all space flight back Soviet Union era during the Cold War, that was all done by national bodies. It was all done by government scientists, government engineers. They would build these launch vehicles, build these spacecraft for national security, for competition, and scientific exploration. But NASA was at the point in the late 90s where they were realizing that the actual launch costs, building rockets, getting everything up there, the bandwidth that's required to not only do it right, but to do it safely for astronauts was immense. It was absolutely massive. And they knew that they were also getting continual cuts from federal government. They were losing a lot of funding. It was difficult to control all these different facets. So they made the decision to invest in the commercial space industry, to basically create an industry from nothing by pouring large amounts of grants, large amounts of funding into a few select companies, giving these large contracts. So what they could do is they could outsource the engineering, let's call it grunt work. Launching a rocket into space doesn't always seem like grunt work, but to NASA, it's something they had done before. They knew they could do it, but if it took all of their bandwidth, all of their resources, then, they're not going to be...
So why not have someone else do it and we can focus on other projects?
Exactly. And so that's what NASA has been working on for basically the last almost 30 years now, is pouring money into that space industry. And right now we're starting to fully realize the fruits of that. Every launch of the ISS is done by pretty much a Falcon 9 right now with Dragon. There was Boeing Starliner, which went up recently. The two original big contracts for the launches and resupplies to the ISS were Boeing and SpaceX. Right now, SpaceX is the main provider. Starliner recently had its first launch. There were a few issues with it, and of course, Dragon had issues in the beginning. But right now, most of that is it's pretty much all Falcon 9s. So I think this move was honestly huge for NASA because they can fully dedicate their resources towards actually coordinating everything, making sure it's done correctly, and pushing the boundaries of space exploration and human understanding. Like they can purely focus on being a scientific body, and an organization towards the betterment of humanity, which is in their core values.
Yeah.
And
so putting telescopes up there, getting
exactly
probes out to Mars and
Artemis,
and
establishing moon colonies, having the Gateway project. Like all of this is stuff that NASA is at the head of it. NASA is organizing it. But the modules, the vehicles, the engineering work, NASA could technically do, but it is so much faster and so much better for, I'd say, the American economy, and just, it's easier on them to have that outsourced to a competitive industry. And frankly, it's produced really good results for them so far. It took a while to pay off, but we're kind of at that, kind of reaching that critical mass now.
So you kind of preempted my next question.
Yeah.
Which I would like to get your take on and talk about the Artemis program.
Oh, yes.
I feel like has now kind of become almost infamous Artemis program.
Yep.
In the sense that there's been a lot of delays.
Yeah.
Not for, unfair reasons.
Yep.
You should probably make sure that, the people that go to the moon or get home safely and everything.
Yeah.
But what has caused the delays? What does the timeline look like right now? and also maybe Artemis. So for people that don't know, the Artemis program is the new moon mission.
Yes.
To get people landed on the moon, and to generally establish like a more permanent presence
Yes.
on and around the moon through building a small space station called Lunar Gateway.
Yes.
But there's been delays. So tell me a little bit about why the missions have been delayed and what the status of the missions is right now.
Well, delays in the space industry about as old as space industry and as old as spaceflight. Like myself arriving to this interview, I was late and over budget, as everything will be. But I think so much of it has been that as the quality of work increases year over year, and as more time has been spent in the ISS, specifically studying the effects of long-term spaceflight exposure in humans, we begin to understand a lot more problems, a lot more potential risks that arise that we didn't even know about earlier. It's not always like, oh, we won't be able to produce a rocket to do this in time. Many of those capabilities exist. It's more of how can we be 100% sure that all of these risks that we've identified from the years of data collection and scientific experiments on station have revealed to us, and how can we be 100% sure, and well, how can we be confident that we're not putting any lives at danger by going to Gateway or going to the lunar surface. So there's a lot of delays there. Frankly, I mean, comes from all over the industry. It's not exactly from one specific place. I do think that right now Gateway is the closest, like, you know, it's next in line. It's the closest to being complete. I think it'll be complete within a matter of years. Lunar landing and lunar colony itself, that's something I can't speak on. I don't have information on timelines for anything like that.
Sure.
I will say that most recently, I know that Starship's HLS configuration has won the HLS contract from NASA for that. So right now, the next generation vehicle SpaceX developing, Starship, is going to have a human lander configuration that they won the contract for and is currently in design. And I got some experience with a little bit of looking and observing some of the systems on that this spring, but I wasn't involved directly in the development.
I thought it was going to be the Orion.
Orion capsule is involved with going to with the Gateway station, but HLS has won a contract as an actual lunar lander as well.
Okay, so will it be the lunar lander, or will it be a lunar lander later on in the line? Like when the Artemis 3, I think it is, or Artemis 4, when they do the lunar landing, will they be using Starship or the Orion?
From my understanding, and I mean, if I had to bet, I believe they'd be using Starship.
Wow. So that big rocket landing on the moon.
Yep. Now, when I say Starship, the HLS that will be landing on the moon, it's going to look a lot different from what Starship looks like right now. Starship's just at, I think August 3rd is still the scheduled date for Flight 5. I don't know if they've pushed it. I'm not employed right now. But it's still on Flight 5. They're still trying to have a successful re-entry of a vehicle like that. Now, 5 flights for a vehicle, the largest vehicle ever flown, is, you know, it's nothing to scoff at, but they're a long way from putting humans on that. So that's still that's a huge hurdle. That's a long ways out. But I have to say that once there's like a consistent flight cadence, and one of the things that's been most interesting about this company is how fast the turnover rate of testing is. It's really where all the resources are put into. So once flights can be reliably done consistently, and you get to, like, instead of a test flight every 6 months, a test flight every week, then I would feel so much more confident about that development. And I think we'd have like a concrete date within a couple of years.
Sure.
It's one of those things, you know, there's so much planning within the industry that is constantly changing based on new discoveries we make in space. I mean, just recently there was this discovery about some of the adverse effects on zero-G, extended effects of zero-G with some astronauts, and that's something that NASA is still looking into for actual, like, creating solutions for long-term space flight. Like,
Well,
in the sense of
I guess tell me a little bit about that, because the last I remember of our research about that was when astronaut Mark Kelly, now senator from Arizona, and maybe VP. We don't know
That would be
yet.
crazy, yeah.
But
Cool.
potential vice presidential contender, current senator from Arizona, and previously a spaceman,
Oh,
an
yeah.
astronaut. He has a twin brother, and he was up in space for like over a year, and he comes down, and he was shorter than his brother, right?
Yes.
Yeah, by like not a lot, but a significant in the grand scheme of things, a significant amount.
A significant amount.
So
yeah.
what do you know about what the research is being done on adverse effects, and how might this affect, like, say, a mission to Mars,
So
where people would be out in space for like months?
yeah, specifically in Kelly's case, I haven't looked into what has caused the. I believe it's a spinal issue that's caused the degeneration at the point where he's shorter. I don't know specifically the rationale behind that. You know, what actually caused that shortness. I know that being prolonged exposure in space, there's the constant effect of, you know, muscle loss, weight loss. You're not exercising your body in a way that normally is done in a gravity environment, and so there's always a natural loss of basic motor functions once you return to Earth, and there's kind of like a period where they have to readjust to that. In the case of losing height, I believe that was an issue with the actual spinal fluid, but I don't quote me on that because I haven't fully researched that aspect. However, I have, like, after hearing other people talk about problems like this, I do know that there's a good amount of confidence that nothing that's been discovered right now is completely taking long-term spaceflight off the table. Okay. Like, nothing has arisen that's like, oh my God, this disqualifies us, like, we're screwed.
Yeah.
I think that there is still a lot to be done medically in research for human spaceflight, and that is why, you know, even though the ISS will eventually be deorbited, the next generation of in-space excuse me, of in-space stations is, you know, it's growing massively.
Sure.
And so for long-term spaceflight, say, for example, it was going to be, you know, it doesn't have to be from a SpaceX angle, but like Starship is something where they've said, like, oh, this vehicle will go to Mars. So from like a Starship perspective, you have a fleet of those going over, like, you know, a 2-year trip to Mars. That's no longer just like a temporary stay on a station where you could have an evacuation at any time. That's effectively, like, that is, well, liability-wise, it's kind of a nightmare. Let's just put it right there. Like, to send that many people on a basically one-way trip is quite the big leap. So
the plan is still, like, to set up a Mars colony.
Plan is still to set up a Mars colony. Yes, that's still, well, let's say that's SpaceX plan. That is a man's plan.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own opinions on that, whether
Sure.
it should happen, how it should happen.
Right.
Right now, at least in my lifetime, I'm most focused on lunar colony, and I think that and the Gateway project is going to be our stepping stone into the rest of the galaxy, into Mars, into other planets. Because I mean, for the case of going to a place like Mars, really your biggest issue is getting out of Earth's gravitational pull, getting out of orbit. That's where you consume all your mass. That's where you consume all your energy. So having a consistent infrastructure set up in low Earth orbits and higher orbits to be able to transfer fuel, supplies, to load up ships, and then to basically have a designated vehicle that can actually make a 2-year trip like that. Well, let's put it this way: if for a trip like that, whatever launches off of the Earth is not the vehicle that's going to be going on a trip like that. Whatever's launching off of the Earth is going to be multiple vehicles that are just carrying the fuel to fuel a vehicle like that. And that vehicle will be orbiting for a while. Then there will be different vehicles that carry up the people.
Might even be built in space.
Might even be built in space, exactly. So it's one of those things where right now we don't have the technology for like a, you know, Star Wars, Starship, or Star Trek style thing where you can have, you know, landing on a surface, go back up to orbit, anything like that.
Yeah.
It takes a village and it takes a fleet of ships to get one operational spacecraft to actually go anywhere. And so setting up Gateway, setting up a lunar colony is absolutely massive for that. Especially if we could utilize lunar regolith to be able to create any sort of propellants. Would be massive as well.
Mining in the
yeah.
Mining?
So this field of study is called in situ resource utilization. It's something that's been massively invested in by NASA within the past few decades, and honestly, a lot of university grants have gone towards it as well. It's basically how can we use resources available on different planets to support life and to support transport and interplanetary travel. Because really, I mean, you can only bring so much with you. Spaceflight is one of the most mass and volume constrained things in engineering because of how notoriously difficult it is to get stuff out of our atmosphere and to keep something that is large and also safe and structurally sound in orbit. So if you're on a different planet, you want to use everything that you can on that planet available to you. And so you have to use pretty much all of the tricks of the trade that NASA and all of humanity has learned to be able to make that happen. So for example, you know, for a rocket engine, you need a fuel and an oxidizer. to be able to combust and create thrust for a rocket to leave. To do that, you need some sort of combustible fuel, so that could be methane. Methane or methalox engines, which use methane and liquid oxygen, are used in Starship right now. And many other liquid engines utilize those two propellants. There are many different propellants, but methane is a common one because it's one that's been deemed most possible for in situ resource utilization on other planets. So say that you mine the lunar regolith, you find that in the in the materials you collect, there are samples of methane, and there's also oxygen deposits. If you can find a way to separate those chemicals and basically produce a plant to refine those and create and separate methane and oxygen, you can build essentially a refueling station anywhere on a planet, anywhere on the moon, on Mars. And there are already places that they've identified as most likely options for that. I mean, look, there's water on Mars, H2O. Through electrolysis, you can get oxygen.
Right.
And so you already have your oxidizer there. Now, actually creating enough to get a vehicle fully filled out of orbit of a planet is a whole nother debacle. It's a whole nother thing. But that is honestly one of the biggest areas of research right now that I would say is also hindering development on another celestial body.
So there's a lot of logistical problems, and there's a lot of resource problems.
The biggest thing is logistics and resources. Yeah, resources I would say are huge, especially for a lunar colony. Less for a lunar colony over a Mars colony, because if it's a Mars colony, you're not getting shipments. You got to make do with what you get there.
You're not getting shipments. Yeah. It's a 8-minute communication delay.
Yes.
And no ship is coming to save you.
Yep. It's a 2-year travel time, which has flight windows every 2 years.
Wait, it's 2. I thought it was 6 to 8 months.
Sorry, I should say the flight windows are every 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
But within that window, it would be a 6-month trip?
6 8 month transit. I think it depends on the window, but around that, yeah.
Right. Which is still very long.
Yep. So you could only
versus 2 days.
You could only the only viable orbital paths appear every 2 years. So you can't send a recovery fleet out or additional supplies till the time that they've already been there for about a year or something.
Yeah.
Which means that, especially for a Mars base, in situ utilization of resources, basically full autonomy is essentially required.
Yeah.
And that is why moon colonization is so entirely important, because we need to develop the skills to do that. If we think about the ISS right now as a vehicle for learning about deep space, human capabilities, deep space travel, the moon base is a vehicle for learning about those capabilities on other planets. Because the moon is a place where we can consistently, well, more consistently than Mars, send up resupplies if they need them, send up more people, more any assistance that they need. It's easier to get someone off the moon back to Earth than it is Mars. I mean, easier said than goddamn done. But
right.
So I mean, for me and for our lifetime specifically, I'm not going to make any calls about Mars, because I think that right now we're at a point where there's so many unknowns with how we're actually going to set up, and like all the discoveries that we've made on the ISS right now for how humans adapt to long-term space flight. I believe we're going to make as many, if not a lot more, realizations once we set up colony on the moon for how an actual civilization like that could be developed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are going to cause inevitable delays. So, predicting delays at compounds, it gets impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of a fool's errand. But at least in my case, I think I'm more confident and more passionate about development in the lunar region.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something earlier about the ISS deorbiting. Yes. What do you know what the timeline is for that? And because obviously someday it will, but I didn't know if is there a plan to do that.
I'm not sure if the date is public or not. But it's within a matter of a decade. I know that NASA has published that. But mainly what it comes down to is that a lot of the actual capsules up there, they're old, they're deteriorating, they're still safe, but they're definitely noticing the age. It's vehicle's been up there for decades now.
Right.
And it is an absolute, it is still one of the most cutting edge laboratories that humanity has, frankly. It remains that. But they're kind of getting to the point where they're realizing they're exhausting a lot of what they want to do, and they need something bigger, they need something that can hold more experiments, and they need more of them, honestly. So the ISS is planning to be deorbited. SpaceX has actually won the contract to deorbit the ISS, which they're essentially just sending up a vehicle that'll stay on there for a little while, and then once all of the crew, astronauts, and essential experiments have been evacuated.
They'll push it.
It'll push it into Earth's atmosphere, and we'll be able to see it burn up on the way in.
Wow.
That will be a monumental day. I think tears will be shed worldwide. My God, for the effect that things had. But with the passage of the ISS, there are huge things on the horizon too. The next generation, like outside of Gateway itself is actually fairly small. As the design of Gateway is fairly small compared to ISS
it's just
right
a few
now.
modules,
Yeah.
right? Three or four.
Because it's basically meant to just like enable sorties to the lunar surface,
Right.
be able to have small crews and just access. ISS is meant as a permanent research institution, and so the next generation of
Gateway's
space
an
stations are
outpost.
like that.
Gateway is an outpost.
Exactly. Yes. Gateway is an outpost. The next generation space stations, and are going to be larger. There's going to be more of them. Some of them won't be as large as the ISS, but the fact that they're going to be more accessible is, I think, one of the biggest things that's going to push that research forward. Because right now, so much of the money of commercial space that we haven't actually seen the benefits of yet, but is very much on the horizon, are within in-space habitats. You have companies like Vast, like Intuitive Machines have done some, that are building large in-space habitats. They're contracted by NASA that will be involved within the next generation of stations that are essentially building everything. So all the habitation will be built by private companies. NASA is still organizing the entire station. They will, all the modules is what they're contracting. It's all built to their needs. But the private industry is playing a massive role, especially in the next generations of on-orbit stations.
I'm going to kind of preempt the last question here.
Okay.
I'm going to modify it a little bit. What are, aside from Gateway and lunar stuff, what are any future missions, whether it's NASA or SpaceX or whatever, that you're super excited for, that you think will be real game changers? Again, besides the moon, because we've talked a lot about Gateway and how much that's going to change the game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, moon's definitely the biggest one for me. I think I feel like that's where the future is right now, if we're talking space travel. But the big thing that I see that will change, life on Earth most realistically for everyone is the growth and accessibility of satellite constellations. I mean, you see that now just beginning with Starlink. Like they have, international internet and direct-to-cell coming soon, TM. But the fact that they're able to get so much mass in orbit so rapidly, I mean, SpaceX currently launches it's something like 95% of all of the mass on Earth to orbit. So all mass that's currently sent up is sent up by a Falcon 9, roughly. But the fact that that skill is not just stuck within one company anymore, it's being developed by so many different industries, so many different companies are getting there too. We're going to be at the place where which is okay, for context, historically, the largest barrier to entry for any sort of space flight or putting anything in space is launch costs. Ton of money, volume and mass cost millions of dollars, and it is just the most difficult thing to basically get. Reducing all the barriers to launch, which is what SpaceX's big thing has been in the past, has made it so they've been able to throw this massive constellation in space and make a product like Starlink actually commercially viable. The fact that this is becoming a lot more commonplace means that you're going to see such a huge emergence of the small sat industry, which is already growing right now. Medium sats, telecom is, I mean, it's just, we're going to be entering an age, I think, of like commercial satellite dominance. You already have a lot of larger companies. I mean, think of any big tech giant right now. I can guarantee you each of them is pursuing their own constellation in one way or another. It's just something that whether it's for their own internal connectivity or whether it's for their own experiments or if they're just trying to create a new telecom service and be a competitor to Starlink, like there is a massive opportunity for business there and also a extreme like growth in jobs within the space industry. Because you need people to be able to manage those constellations, to be able to plan orbits, to be able to work in, pretty much every field of STEM to be able to support stuff like that. And we're finally at a point where the financial barrier is being slowly degraded by making launch easier and easier. So once that happens, you're basically going to see, I think, like a new super industry kind of emerge within space. Now, I don't know, people have talked about like different industries that emerge from space. In-space manufacturing, like mining, stuff like that, I still think is a ways out.
Sure.
I don't see stuff like that outside of, an individual vehicle or something being used to being manufactured in space for ease of use, being really accessible. I don't know about our lifetimes, but just the access to low Earth orbits and even higher orbits, polar orbits, it is easier than ever to get something to circle our planet. And I think companies and governments everywhere are realizing that.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that because, I don't know, a lot of opportunities, a lot of cool stuff coming out.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm excited for I guess I don't want to repeat what you've said. But I also am excited for all that, but I'm also excited for more advanced telescopes
Oh, yes.
to be launched. James Webb was kind of a game changer,
Absolutely.
and
Holy
I
crap.
think the next generation out past James Webb could be really game changing for humanity.
Yep.
I mean, that like we're at the point where it might be possible with James Webb, but it probably will be possible with the next generation after James Webb
Yep.
to do analyses of the atmospheres of exoplanets.
Yes.
Including biosignatures, which is crazy.
Right?
And
That's
so
going to be cool.
that's, I mean, that being a I'm really excited for, this is probably a decade or two out, but the Europa Clipper.
Yes. Yeah, Clipper is going to be cool. Oh, my God.
The Clipper is going to be cool. I would love, I know there's talk of a Venus rover. I don't know if that's on the books or not, but it also probably not for a decade, but
Is that Dragonfly?
Is it called Dragonfly?
I know there was one. There was another helicopter-based, not quite rover, but basically a drone, Venus-based one. I thought called Dragonfly.
Is it scheduled or did it land?
I haven't looked at it in a while. Scheduled, did not land.
Well, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it like a year ago or something. I honestly just haven't heard anything about it since. I think their lab's working at John Hopkins. They have an advanced aerospace research laboratory there, and I believe that they're contracted for it. I don't know what the progress is though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Venus rover would be cool. Missions to Titan.
Oh yeah. See, like that's the thing. I mean, for the people I think nowadays, myself included, I fall victim to this, give like the commercial space industry a lot of credit because that's where flashy stuff is happening. You get a lot of rocket launches.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, NASA's still the one that's actually pushing those boundaries and developing the tech and the knowledge for this all to happen. Like you go in any of those companies, every one of them is referencing all of the white papers from White Sands, white papers from Houston. They're referencing years of development that NASA has paved the way for. And that's what they continue to do.
NASA still has a total monopoly, even internationally, on just outside Earth orbit probes.
Yep. Oh, 100%.
I mean, other countries do cool stuff too, but like the sheer volume of little robots that NASA sends out is crazy.
And that's why, there's still that amount of existential dread when it comes to commercial space is taking over. There's companies in space now that are going to rule space, and there are valid concerns about that. But I think in NASA's case, it was their plan, and it's working out pretty great for them right now.
Right.
Because they can work on truly pushing the boundaries of human learning and understanding, and we as a species can reap those benefits. And I mean, a lot of the companies are doing that already.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we kind of covered what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I guess so.
Unless there's anything else.
I'm looking forward to my last year of school. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Wrapping it up.
Yeah, wrapping it up. I've got a senior design project lined up, and then also, just being back, seeing all my friends.
Right.
That'll be nice.
Right.
Taking some cool classes, and then honestly, having some time off this summer's been really nice.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Yeah.
I've also kind of had a summer off. I haven't been doing summer classes, and
nice.
Really also enjoyed I'm really enjoying my time off and time away.
I can dedicate all my energy towards stressing about the election season. It's awesome. Really great.
And the occasional trivia night.
And the occasional trivia night, of course, which we sweep.
Yes, always.
Easily.
Every time. It's kind of, I feel bad for the other teams that
it's
show
true.
up.
Shout out Schweinhaus. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, Warren.
Thank you very much for having me, Finn. I'm so glad I could make it.
Yes, I'm glad we made it work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, despite my many delays.
Yeah.
I definitely represent, I guess, the industry I work for. Oh God.
That's all a metaphor.
Yeah.
It's all planned. All planned.
All part of the plan. Don't worry.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Bye, everyone.